in the early 90s, I went to Barnes and Nobles. I loved frequenting that bookstore. I used to call it the Mecca of all bookstores because the selection was so large and they had comfortable seating to sit down and kind of page through books. And I was over in the tape area back then. They had tape areas. For those of you that don't know what that is, I don't know, maybe it's a mystery to some people. And they went to CDs, and now they have flash drives and everything is digital. But at least we were past the, the VHR, VHS, and all that stuff, and the 8-track that you'd plug into your car. So we're not going back that far. But it was, I was in the poetry section of the cassette tape area, and I believe yes, I was quite familiar with W.H. Auden at that time because I had discovered the more loving one while I was in prison in, I think it was 1986, 87. I was in the education unit at Oak Park Heights, Minnesota Correctional Facility. And I came across that poem. So when I saw at that Barnes and Noble a cassette with his poetry on it, I thought, I think I'd like to check this out. And they had some little thing where you could start, you'd had samples of each one that you could play and listen to right on the spot. And Funeral Blues was one of the poems, and it just said a few lines from it. And I thought, okay, it kind of opened my heart. And this is long before I had healed enough to not want to commit suicide after speaking for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I got the cassette tape home and I listened to it, and it just tore me up, And I heard it from the perspective of little Timmy's mom, how she might have felt. And it's presumptuous to say how another human being feels because no one knows except for the person that's in the grief. And sometimes I wonder if the person themselves in the grief can comprehend their own grief. If it was that explainable, then it wouldn't be grief. So anyway, I decided to use that poem in some of my speeches, and it was very difficult to do, to actually get through the reading. But I think it was useful to the speeches, and I'm going to go ahead and read it to you here, and hopefully the poem doesn't show up over my face when I enlarge it. If it does, whatever, it'll probably save you a minute here. It's more about the audio anyway. So W.H. Auden, Funeral Blues. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let the aeroplanes circle, moaning overhead, scribbling in the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe boards round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now, put out every one. pack up the moon and dismantle the sun, pour away the ocean and sweep up the woods, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Ooh, yeah, he meant that, didn't he? Oftentimes in MADD, people will talk about how it's not fair that a parent has to bury a child. It's supposed to be the other way around. And I get the truth of that, if you will. And that again is a theory of life. You know, I believe in sacred contracts. And it doesn't justify anything to believe in sacred contracts. You know, I think a lot of people would bring up the worst things that have happened in life to themselves or historically, Caligula or whatever, you know, whoever the horrible people have been through our history or maybe even in our personal lives. And to think, how could we have a contract, a sacred contract, to go through something this horrendous? Why? Why me? And then I heard somebody once say, well, why not me? Sometimes I think we go through things for other people. I had a dream about little Timmy. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, little Timmy is the child that I killed while I was driving a stolen car under the influence of alcohol. It was August 15th of 77. And here we are in August of 2022. So it's been a while, but this is what I've talked about in MADD and Minnesotans for Safe Driving, and have done many speeches through the years. But at some point, it occurred to me that maybe little Timmy and I have a sacred contract, you know, and this might really piss a few people off for me to even say it, but, you know, if that's what you think, it's what you think. But you know, that sacred contract, what if Timmy decided to give his life to save yours? If you've ever driven under the influence of alcohol, who are you to diminish his life? Who am I? Anybody else? And, you know, at least I'm bringing his memory and honoring his life by talking about it and saying it mattered. And, you know, what I did was wrong. But what if my end of the sacred contract is that, you know, I spend the rest of my life doing something about it? And I've had a number of people through the years say that the rendition of my story has made a difference in their life. Some said they'll never drive under the influence ever again. Some have, you know, since I've talked about forgiveness so much, some have even said the story of forgiveness helped save their life. And there's been people who have listened to the speech that were suicidal and on death's door for many reasons, I suppose. They didn't say why. There was one guy who said that my speech saved his life. He was going to commit suicide and changed his mind. Another guy said that it saved his life, and didn't give any details. And you know, you hear that a lot after speaking for MADD. Other people have had it said to them too. But you know, that the idea of a sacred contract, it's like, you know, maybe more people have lived than have died. You know, Timmy died, but what if a lot of people lived because of sharing that story? And Timmy's mom and I are friends, and she says she loves me and she forgives me. She does that for her own reasons. You know, she's a woman of faith, but it's so, to me, profound that she now goes into prisons to try and help offenders, not reoffend. And that's what I do too. And she's taking her tragedy, and indeed it was a tragedy. It was the most painful day of her entire life. Up until this time, as far as I know, it's the most painful thing that she's ever has happened in her life. And I believe her. And I also believe her when she says she loves and forgives me. Who am I to say that she shouldn't do that? And I used to think I didn't deserve any love or respect or forgiveness from people, and certainly not to myself. And the whole idea of forgiving myself was like out of the question. You don't do that. It was wrong, But I really think that if we forgive ourselves, if we love ourselves, now here I'm getting Christian on you here, I suppose, but Christ talked about, love your enemies. Well, I was my own enemy. And I would get done speaking and I would want to commit suicide. For the first 8 years of speaking, I did want to commit suicide after speaking, not every time, but often. And it was the hardest thing I ever did to not press on that accelerator and get my car up to 100 miles an hour. And I really wanted to do it so bad and crash my car into a bridge or a tree or something. And, and just to prove to you people and little Timmy's mom and whoever else would find out I had, crashed and died, how sorry I was for what I did. And the lady that got me involved in MADD, Mary Jo Robinson, I had heard her speak when I was sober for 90 days, and she talked about how the person who killed her son, she faced him in court and gave her victim impact statement, and her statement was standing in front of him while holding his face in her hand. She held up her hand and she held his chin like this, and she did it lovingly and respectfully and asked his permission ahead of time. But when she reached out her hand to him and their eyes locked, she raised up his face with her hand. And she said, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you for killing my son. And this kid broke down crying, and after he had the holy water leaving his eyes, and he expected that he was going to just get raked over the coals, and he might have been suicidal himself, who knows, and if she would have told the kid, hey, my son's dead and you're alive, and it ain't fair, you should kill yourself, you don't deserve to be here, you should be dead. And I've had people tell me that after I spoke too, by the way. And but and I'm not saying they don't have a right to feel that way. We grieve as we grieve, and we feel as we feel, right or wrong. Right or wrong, I guess, really is beyond the pale, the question. It's where we're at. And right or wrong that I wanted to commit suicide, people have told me, well, Jesus forgives you, and we forgive you. But to hear people say that, you have to experience it yourself somehow, and I did. Mary Jo told me, I told her I was going to quit MADD. I can't do this. I sobered up to have a good life. I didn't sober up to want to die after speaking. And she got me into it because she said, you might help an alcoholic to quit drinking, and you might save somebody, from getting in a drunk driving tragedy and all that. And I understood it, but I didn't know I was going to feel desperately suicidal after speaking. And I finally just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I got to tell you, it's harder staying alive than it is committing suicide, And when I sobered up, I couldn't run to alcohol or drugs or anything anymore to hide my pain. I had to feel everything. And I got news for you, feeling everything, probably most of us know that can be very hard at certain points in our lives. But man, I had a lot of stuff on my plate. And Mary Jo said, you can't quit talking. You got to do this. And then she's the one that said I was walking with the enemy and the enemy is me. And she's not the one who said, forgive your enemies and the enemy is you. But she said, like the Bible says, forgive your enemies. She didn't put it together in that way. But, she said, you need to do some mirror therapy. And I've told this story so many times through the years. And she gave me an assignment. She said, look into the mirror and tell yourself, Timothy, I love you. And when you do it, you point at yourself, you look yourself in the eyes and you say it out loud. You don't say it in your mind. You don't have a cigarette first thing in the morning, coffee or whatever people do. I wasn't even a smoker at that time, but making a point. First thing you do, you don't even pee, nothing. You look in the mirror and you rewire your brain in so many words. She said, that's what mirror therapy does. And she said, say, Timothy, I love you. And you do that every morning, every day until you mean it. And the first time I did it, I thought it was stupid that I was even going to try, but I said those words. I said, Timothy, I love you. And I didn't have a breakthrough. I didn't have a healing moment. I didn't have things are all better now. And in fact, it was the opposite. All the pain that I had within me, it's like I had picked a scab on my heart or something, and I didn't know the scab was there. And when I picked it, it just started gushing blood everywhere, spiritual pain, if you will. And that's one of the values of a MADD panel, I think, for victims, is that we have a reservoir of pain within our hearts. And if we don't siphon it off, that pain can break our heart, and our spirit heart can explode within us. Some people die of grief, and I wasn't a victim in any classical sense, but, I was a victim of my own design. And my design for living was to avoid living. And, I think I wasn't trying to escape in a way, because if drinking or drugging to escape would have accomplished that, I'd still be doing it. I wasn't escaping. Every time I drank, it was like, if it was an escape, it was an escape into hell. It wasn't a fun thing for me. It was fun for a while, the first drink or two. And then I would go down this rabbit hole of way beyond what I want to tell you here, but it was horrible. And so saying, I love you, Timothy, I love you, for 8 years in a row, that's a lot of work. I don't think I missed a day. Maybe I did, who knows? But it was the habit, it was just the habit that I was in. And one day I did finally have a breakthrough. I was looking in the mirror and doing my morning, jaunt assignment, if you will. And I said, Timothy, I love you. And I meant it. And I was shocked that I meant it. It's like, what? Say, excuse me? And I leaned forward and I looked closer at the mirror. And I couldn't see the ex-convict in the reflection. And I know it's like, it seems impossible, but I could have swore I saw like a whitish haze around my face, like it was a gentle aura of white peace was kind of shining from my face. And I loved and forgave myself at that moment, and I couldn't see the so-called killer. I couldn't see the person that had gone through all the things I'd gone through. He just wasn't there. And from that day forward, I didn't want to avoid the MADD panels. I didn't want to kill myself after speaking on one of the panels. It went away. It was gone. And I know it was a Friday. And I just wanted to share this joy, this happiness that I experienced from this breakthrough. And I went down to the Maplewood Alano Club where I was attending 12-step meetings. And I was just so happy. I just needed, it's just like, you ever been so happy? You just got to share it, with people, and you just, um, I was in one of those places and nothing could ruin it. It just, and there was a bunch of people out having cigarettes and chatting in front of the Alano Club before the 6 p.m. meeting. And I stopped in the middle of this little pavilion space, and I said it really loud, and I'm not going to cuss here, but I said, check out this stuff. Y'all going to love this stuff. And they all stopped what they're doing, and everyone looked at me. And I said, this morning I looked in the mirror, and I said, Timothy, I love you. And I meant it. I meant it. And people were just quiet, and they just kind of looked at me and then looked at each other kind of odd, and no one knew what to say, except for one lady had a comment, and I'll never forget her. And she took a big hit off of her cigarette and blew a plume of smoke up into the air and said, looking over her shoulder, she didn't even give me the courtesy of facing me directly or walking up to me, She said, what, are you going to kiss yourself too? And that didn't make me mad, I knew instantly she didn't understand, and that was okay. There may be people listening to this that don't understand. Maybe I still don't understand, but I do know that I was free enough to never want to kill myself after speaking again. And that was a beautiful thing. So yeah, the sacred contract with little Timmy, I think he's looking down from heaven and he approves of how I'm using my life. And I remember having a dream vision of being with him, and his looking at me with love, and his being passed on to me. And, and I was holding him and looking at him, and his eyes were not filled with contempt. They were filled with love, and I could just feel it, and I've had God, if you will, talk to me a lot of times through the years, either through visions or through dreams. Sometimes I'll even hear them, and I remember being trapped in a desperate misery when I was 16 years old, and I was going to commit suicide. But I guess God had a plan for my life, and I just said, God, if you're real, let me know, because I'm out here, and I hadn't slept in days, and I was seeing horrible things in my mind, and just beyond. It's in a chapter in my book, and Rest My Child is the name of the chapter. But those are the words that I heard when I said, God, if you're real, please help me. And I heard those words, rest my child. And the psychotic episodes that I had been experiencing, and my inability to sleep, I hadn't slept in days. I immediately fell to sleep into a peaceful slumber, and I woke up the next morning free of the psychotic episodes that I'd been experiencing for months. I don't know how long it was, but it got from bad to worse until I was just going to have to kill myself. And I was freed, and unfortunately, I wish I would have turned my life around, and I went back into drinking, and, things didn't get better, and one thing led to another. And of course, I killed little Timmy, and instead of finishing treatment, I ran away, and that whole thing, so, well, I guess I'm going to stop now. If you got anything out of this, let me know, and I'm going to pass this on to some friends of mine too. Peace out, people. Remember to tell 3 people a day that you love them. If you don't, you've wasted a day of your life. Don't waste your life. Pass on the love, pass on the forgiveness. Let's make the world a better place to live in.